Is July 15th, 2017. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so now we will be continuing our survey of the Anguttara Nikaya. This is the Ekaka-nipāta, the book of the ones. Okay, I'm going to skip over this section from 378 to 393, which is mostly just a list of primarily, well, it mentions miscellaneous items, ascetic practices, particular skills in the Dhamma, and so forth. And we come to section 9, which I call a compendium of the whole teaching, because it brings in very concisely many, many aspects of the teaching, of the practice. And it does this under the heading of how a monk is said to be one who acts upon the teaching of the teacher. The teacher here with a capital T is the Pali word satta, which refers to the Buddha. And so this is how one practices the teaching of the Buddha. And it further connects this theme of practicing with, it uses an expression that might seem a little bit strange to Americans, to Westerners, one who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. So what does this expression mean? Okay, now, monastics don't work at jobs to earn money and then go to the shop to buy their food and bring it home and cook it, but they depend upon the dana, the generosity, the offerings of lay people. And probably the one item amongst all the items that they depend upon, or that symbolizes this relationship, this, call it a symbiotic relationship between the lay community and the monastics. Of course, there are many items that they depend on, that we depend on. Robes, dwelling place, medicines, nowadays cell phones, computers. But there's one item which is provided daily, every day, on a day-to-day basis, and that is food, what's called the pindapata, the alms food. And so within the countries of Theravada Buddhism, like Burma, Thailand, the practice has fallen out in Sri Lanka, but especially Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. Every day, the monks in the morning, they take their alms bowl and they go walking through the streets, usually in single file, going from house to house silently, eyes cast down, not looking around, and then coming to each house, standing silently with the alms bowl held in front of them. And then lay people who know that the monks will be coming, they have prepared the food offerings for the monks. And often, I think in Thailand and Laos, they'll bring a little table out in front of the house, and then they'll have the various dishes set out on the table, and they'll have a plate with little bags, usually wrapped in, but it used to be wrapped in banana leaves. Now, unfortunately, they're using this thin plastic. With little bags containing rice, or else they'll have a big bowl with rice, which they'll dish out into the bowl of each monk as they pass by. Okay, so this is the practice, the way in which the monks, and where now there's nuns communities, the way the nuns receive their food for the day. So they'll go on the alms round early in the morning, then they'll bring all of the food back to the monastery, and then they'll dish it out into various containers, and then they'll take what they want for the breakfast, and the rest will remain for the midday meal. And then when the midday meal comes, then they'll again come to the dining hall, and the food will be offered again. Or else they might take their midday meal in their bowl back to their hut or their room, and then just consume it there. Okay, and so in this way, the monastics receive the alms food for the day. And now, I said that this is a symbiotic relationship. And so one way in which the monastics repay the lay community for their generosity in providing the food is by teaching the Dhamma. And so those who have the skills in teaching will teach, but not every monk has skills in teaching, has interest in teaching. But still, they have to make themselves worthy of the offerings. Because the offerings, this is where there's a little bit of an unspoken exchange agreement. Unsigned, unspoken, but a little bit of an exchange agreement, sort of tacitly understood. And that is, when lay people make offerings to the monastics, through the intention of making the offering and the act of making the offering, they acquire something which is called, in Pali, punya, in Chinese, fu or fu de, and in English it's translated as merit. So what is this merit? It's wholesome karma, virtuous karma. That's good karma with the potential to come back to the donor, to the one who makes the offering, and to produce results that are considered desirable. That is, it's karma with the potential to bring well-being and happiness. Okay, but I said that the karma, technically, it's generated by the intention of the donor. So it's through the intention motivating the action of giving that the donor acquires that merit. But here's where there's, again, this is like the fine print in the contract. That for the act of giving to be truly meritorious, the recipient should be somebody who is virtuous and of good character. And particularly in the case of the Buddhist monastic order, it's one who is putting the teaching into practice. So it's not only that the monastic, by putting the teaching into practice, serves as an example for the lay person, but actually this is something which is happening at the level of subtle causation. Maybe you call it the level of occult, O-C-C-U-L-T, occult causation, that the recipient, by virtue of their sincere and dedicated practice, and also at the highest level, by virtue of their attainments, their spiritual attainments, become a punya-keta, a field of merit, a worthy recipient of the offerings of the lay people. And so, at the highest level, the sort of highest recipient of offerings is the arahant. And in fact, the word arahant itself, as I explained in our Pali class the other day, is derived from the verb arahati. And that verb arahati means to be worthy, to be deserving. So it's said that the arahat, or the word arahat, could be rendered the worthy one. And the reason why the arahat is called worthy one is because the arahat is the one who is truly worthy to receive the offerings of people and to receive the veneration of human beings and even of the devas, the deities. So those of us who are like below the level of arahat, it's said that when we receive the offerings of food and other offerings from lay people, we are using them as debtors. We are in debt to them. Because we use them, we're not yet fully worthy of them, but we use those offerings in order to help us with our commitment and with our practice. And in doing so, we're striving or endeavoring to make ourselves worthy of those offerings. And so those, even it's said, even those who are stream enterers, once returners, non-returners, the holy ones of the three preliminary stages, even they are using the offerings as debtors. Their debt, of course, has been considerably reduced, but even there's still a little, even for the non-returner, there's some residue of debt. So in Mahakassapa, this is in Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 16, sutta number 11, where Mahakassapa is relating the story of his encounter with the Buddha. After he received instructions from the Buddha and went off to practice, he said that he ate the alms food of the country as a debtor for 7 days. Then on the 8th day, the knowledge of liberation arose. And so for those 7 days, Mahakassapa, who was about to be designated, who had all of the qualities, the paramis and spiritual perfections created to entitle him to become one of the foremost great disciples of the Buddha, even he said during those 7 days from the time he received the Buddha's instructions and started to practice to the 8th day when he achieved arhatship, through that whole week, he was using the country's alms food as one in debt. Okay, but in this sutta, the Buddha takes, I would say, a more lenient position. And so he says, if for just the time of a finger snap, a monk develops the first jhana, he is called a monk who is not devoid of jhana, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, to the Buddha's advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. And so when it's said in vain, there's a Pali word here. Is mogang. Which can mean futilely, fruitlessly, purposelessly. And the way I would understand it, to eat the country's alms food in vain would apply both to the monk or not the monk himself or the nun, it also applies to the lay people who make the offerings. So if a monk receives the offerings of lay people, his daily food, then he goes back to his room and he just watches the sports games, the sports on the TV, and takes long, long naps, gets up and watches the variety show on the television, and then meets with his friends for the afternoon tea and spends a couple of hours chit-chatting about this and that. Then goes back to his room and again watches the TV, listens to the radio. That would be eating the country's alms food in vain with reference to himself. And then in the case of the people who make the offerings, of course, if they make the offerings out of sincere faith, with devotion, with trust in the virtue and sincerity of the monk or nun. Actually, it's usually the monks who are eating in vain. The nuns are usually much more diligent. Truly, truly. Okay, so with respect to the lay people, if they make the offerings with sincere intention, of course they're going to be creating wholesome states of mind and generating merit. But it's if the monk is living like a lax, heedless life, then he's not living up to the expectations of the lay people. And so it said that the merit will be proportionally reduced compared to the case if he is living a truly virtuous, diligent, heedful life. Okay, so here we have the first sutta. This is beginning, the opening of a whole series of suttas, which is going to bring in, to comprise the entire teaching from different perspectives. And so here, the first 4 suttas in the series are explained by way of the first the 4 jhanas. The first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. And I think the way I understand it, the word jhana can have 2 meanings, at least 2 meanings. One is the more technical sense of the meditative absorption, a state in which the mind becomes immersed or in its object to the point where, technically speaking, it transcends the level of desire realm consciousness and enters a new, different domain of consciousness the form or subtle material, the subtle materiality or subtle form domain of consciousness. So there's a certain threshold, and when the mind goes into the first jhana, then it leaves behind all of the distracting thoughts, the mental hindrances, becomes immersed and absorbed in its object. And the mind in that state of absorption is not the ordinary mind of the desire realm, but it's the mind of the beings in the form realm, or the realm of subtle matter. So what enables beings or people to be reborn in the form realm is the attainment of jhana as human beings. Okay, so this is jhana in the narrow or technical sense. It is the state of meditative absorption in which there are 4 levels. The 4 levels are distinguished according to the subtlety of the mental factors in those successive stages of jhana. Okay, then in the broader sense, jhana can be understood as, maybe we could say simply as meditation, or a state of sustained meditation. So of course one who develops and enters into the first jhana would be one who definitely has sustained meditation. And actually, it just occurred to me, what's interesting here is that the text says that a bhikkhu who develops the first jhana. And so this might be understood also in 2 ways. It could be, it doesn't say, the text does not say a bhikkhu who attains and dwells in the first jhana. And so it may not necessarily mean that to be worthy of the country's alms food, that one has actually attained the first jhana. Though of course that would increase the value of the practice. But one could be in the process of cultivating, or one could be in the process of cultivating the practice leading to the first jhana. So even if one is not yet successful in attaining the jhana, but if one undertakes the practice and is earnestly practicing any of these meditation subjects that lead to the jhana, mindfulness of breathing, a kasina meditation, mindfulness of the body, that could still, even if one does that just for a finger snap, it could be said that one does not eat the country's alms food in vain. I'm opening up a very wide door. So you might think that our monk who's sitting there watching the sports game on television during the commercial, he thinks the commercial is 5. How long are the commercials now? 5 minutes. So he turns down the sound and thinks, okay, I'll sit here. In breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. Okay, that's more than a finger snap. Turn the sound back up. Okay, I don't want to joke in this way. No, but I think the monk would really have to be practicing sincerely, and perhaps when it speaks about a finger snap, it means the actual attainment of the first jhana. I don't know. Okay, anyway, so we have the first group of suttas are laid out by way of the 4 jhanas. So first jhana, in which we have, according to the usual formula, we have the mental factors of vitakka and vichara, that's applied thought and examination, piti or joy, sukha, pleasure, the mental pleasure, and Ekaka, chitas ekaka, the one-pointedness of the mind. Then to progress to the second jhana, thought and examination fall away, and there's just piti, joy, pleasure, and one-pointedness of mind. In progressing to the third absorption, the third jhana, the piti falls away, and there is sukha, pleasure, and one-pointedness of mind. And then in attaining the fourth jhana, then pleasure, the pleasant feeling, falls away, and it's replaced by neutral feeling, neither painful nor pleasant, and one-pointedness of mind. Okay, that's the factor analysis of the jhanas. But the suttas use more complex formulas. For that, you can look in the middle-length discourses, sutta number 27, sutta number 38, sutta number 38, 39. No, I said 38. Sutta number 39, sutta number, I know 51 has it, 53 has it. There are many suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya and in the Anguttara Nikaya that have the jhana formula. Okay, the next way in which one becomes worthy of the country's alms food are the four immeasurable states of mind. These are also called the four Brahma-viharas. I found in the oldest literature, they speak about these states as the appamanya, which means immeasurable, boundless, because one develops each of these boundlessly throughout to all the beings, all sentient beings in all the directions, and throughout the entire world. In the later literature, they predominantly come to be called Brahma-vihara. And what I found in the canonical text, in the suttas, when the word Brahma-vihara is used to describe these four meditative states, it always does, the suttas always do so when they're explaining how these meditative states constitute the path to rebirth in the Brahma world. Later, like in the Visuddhimagga, Brahma-vihara comes to be used to describe these states no matter what the purpose of their practice is, whether they're being used as a means to rebirth in the Brahma world or used as a means for developing the basis for insight. Okay, so the four are metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. That is loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. And of the four, the one that we usually use as the basis for the others is, in fact, I believe that they are set out deliberately in this order. Because the first one, loving kindness, serves as the basis for the other three. And so loving kindness is explained or defined as the wish for the welfare and happiness of all beings. And so one begins taking oneself as the starting point, develops a sense of the wish for one's own well-being and happiness. Then on that basis, one starts extending that concern for the well-being and happiness of others to increasingly wider circles, proceeding through geographical regions, then to different directions, until one can extend the loving kindness to embrace the whole world. Okay, then when one has this mind of, I call it a loving concern for the well-being and happiness of others, then when one encounters those who are afflicted with suffering, that will arouse, the natural response it arouses is a feeling of compassion for those in suffering. And so on the basis of the wish for the well-being of others, when one sees that they are deprived of well-being and are actually oppressed by suffering, then one arouses compassion towards them. And similarly, one proceeds to first focus the compassion on those who are undergoing some type of severe and overt manifest suffering. And then one can extend that compassion to those who are undergoing subtler forms of suffering until when one has the realization. This is why compassion has an element of wisdom built into it. When one sees that even those in position of relative happiness and security are still subject to suffering, at least to the suffering of old age, sickness, and death, then one can develop compassion for all beings. Okay, then the converse of compassion arises when one witnesses or reflects on the suffering of others. The next divine state, Brahma-vihara, divine abode, is mudita, which is what I translate altruistic joy or sympathetic joy. And this arises when one witnesses or considers the well-being of others or the good fortune and success of others. So one sees that others have achieved some success in their virtuous pursuits, or that others possess good qualities. Then instead of feeling resentment towards them, envy, competitiveness, anger, one identifies with them, and in this way one could generate a feeling of joy for their success and their happiness. So that is altruistic joy. And then the fourth one is upekkha, equanimity, and this is the ability to look on at beings who are, say, friendly towards oneself, who have a favorable relationship to oneself, and those who are hostile towards oneself, who are maybe aggressive towards oneself, to look upon them equally without discrimination and without feelings of preference for one and resentment towards the others. So this is equanimity, we could say here is, maybe has the meaning of impartiality. And also this equanimity protects one when one witnesses the suffering of others and experiences compassion. It prevents one from being overwhelmed by that compassion felt for the suffering of others. And when one is rejoicing in the good fortune of others, the equanimity prevents one from sort of sliding into jubilation or frivolous joy. But it helps one, while maintaining compassion and altruistic joy, to have some degree of, call it equipoise, when experiencing those mental states. Okay, so these are the 4 divine abodes, or the 4 immeasurables. Maybe I'll ask at this point if there's any questions. Yeah, Stephen. Oh, please, pass the microphone back.
Hi. I had 2 quick questions. The first one is when we speak of right concentration and it's equated with jhana, does that refer to your first or second sort of type of definition, or both?
In the formula for right concentration, it mentions the 4 jhanas, so it's referring to those states of jhanic absorption.
Okay. My other question was going back to the sort of pact between the giver and the receiver and the worthy one.
Yeah, I said that it's a tacit pact.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a formal. Yeah.
But of course, I think I'm right that the Buddha taught that giving is just so incredibly important in general that we sort of can't even imagine how important it is. But it seems that, is it really so important to worry about how worthy those recipients are? Because it seems it would kind of lead to selective giving.
Yeah, I have to say this is an aspect about traditional Buddhist practice that, I feel some dislike for, but it has an effect on people in traditional Buddhist countries that they're looking out for people who might have reached some kind of deep attainment or high attainment, and then flocking to that person or those monasteries which are, say, specialized in intensive meditation, with the idea that if they make offerings there, they're going to get multiples more of merit than if they make offerings to poor people or just the ordinary monks in the temple performing the conventional services for the lay community. But there are suttas which say that the act of giving speaks about 4 kinds of purification of offerings. And by purification, the commentaries explain that it means that it's the enhancement of the merit from the act of giving. And it said that the offering is purified by the giver. It can be purified by the giver, but not the receiver. That is, when the giver is somebody who has a generous heart and a virtuous, of good character, but the receiver is not virtuous, is corrupt. Okay, there's the act of giving, which is purified by the receiver, not by the giver. This is where the donor is corrupt, but still he practices giving. And then the receiver is pure and of good character. Then there's the act of offering, which is purified by both, by a virtuous giver and virtuous receiver, and an act of giving, which is purified by neither. This is where a corrupt donor gives to a corrupt receiver. And there are situations like that I'm aware of in some of the monasteries that I've seen, where the lay people who are supporting the monastery engage in unscrupulous types of ways of earning their money, cheating, gambling, selling illicit substances, but still they believe that they could cancel out some of their karmic debt from their modes of wrong livelihood by making offerings to the monastery. A merit laundering. And then the monasteries that they choose, maybe they're sort of naturally drawn to those monasteries where the monks who are living there are corrupt. And so there's a kind of pact going on, the unspoken pact, that corrupt lay people will make offerings to corrupt monastics, believing that still they'll be generating merits. Okay, shall we continue? Okay, so now... Oh, okay.
Two questions from the same person. The question number one is, so the first interpretation of jhana is as in right samadhi. What are the others possible interpretation? What are the other possible interpretation of first jhana?
Of first jhana?
Yes.
No, I didn't say that there's any different. I said that the word jhana in that particular passage seems to be being used in two different ways. When it's spoken about the four jhanas, then it's referring to the four jhanas in the technical sense. But when it's said that the monk is not devoid of jhana, here jhana seems to be used in the sense, the broader sense of meditation. And the reason why I say that is because later in the series, we'll come to some suttas which speak about states that we would ordinarily consider to be practices of insight meditation, like the perception of impermanence. Okay, here it will say that the monk who develops the perception of impermanence is not devoid of jhana. But the perception of impermanence is not a meditation subject that leads to the four jhanas. And so the kind of jhana that the monk who develops the perception of impermanence will possess is not the four jhanas of the standard formula, but it's jhana in the broader sense of meditation. Because the word jhana itself derives from the verb jayati. The verb jayati originally, the original sense is to contemplate or to consider closely and carefully. And before the time of the Buddha, and probably during the Buddha's time in ordinary usage, the word jayati, the verb jayati and the noun jhana was used to mean just the very close, careful, sustained attention to any subject. And then the Buddha, or perhaps even before the Buddha, the meditative tradition took over that word and gave it the technical sense of a state of meditative absorption. And then the Buddha stratified these four levels of absorption. So we have the four jhanas. Yeah. You said that there were two questions? Okay, the question is, liberation of the mind through the four Brahma-viharas is mentioned after the four jhanas in the sutta. Does it mean they are higher than the four jhanas? No, it's not saying that one is higher than the other. It's just enumerating all of these different practices in a series. And in fact, when we take like the Abhidhammic and commentarial explanation of the liberation of the mind through the four immeasurables or Brahma-viharas, it explains that this liberation of mind is actually the attainment of jhana through these as meditation subjects. So the development of meditative development of loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity can lead to the jhanas. So one could have the jhana based on loving kindness, jhana based on compassion, jhana based on altruistic joy, based on equanimity. Yeah, use the microphone.
Aren't there also the 4 formless jhanas as well? Or does this refer only to the form jhanas?
When it's speaking here about the 4 jhanas, it's referring to the 4 jhanas of the suttas, which I just went through briefly. The expression formless jhanas comes to be used in the commentaries. I'm not sure about the Abhidhamma, but it's used in the commentaries to refer to the 4 what I call the 4 formless meditative states. In the suttas, I don't think those 4 are called the 4 formless jhanas. That's a later expression.
Okay. All right.
But they're just called the arupa, formless states.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
It should work on its own.
Oh,
Yeah, it's on.
I want to ask a question. The 4 Brahma-viharas, what are the relationship with the 4 jhanas? It's like the reason, the cause of 4 jhanas, or 4 jhana is the cause for 4 Brahma-viharas?
No, I thought that I just explained. Okay, the 4 jhanas can be developed on the basis of many different meditation subjects. The 4 Brahma-viharas can be used as meditation subjects for developing the 4 jhanas. And so the 4 jhanas don't depend on the 4 Brahma-viharas. One could use other meditation methods to achieve the jhanas, like mindfulness of breathing, the kasinas, which are colored discs, or various meditation subjects to attain the jhanas. But one can, amongst those meditation subjects, one can use the 4 Brahma-viharas. They can become meditation subjects leading to jhana.
So they are not, quite related to each other. Oh, the 4 Brahma-viharas are the result of the 4 jhanas.
Or what?
Are the result of the 4 jhanas?
Well, of course, one could practice the 4 Brahma-viharas. In the preliminary stage, they won't be at the level of jhana. So when we just sit doing the loving kindness meditation, thinking, may all beings be well, may all beings be happy, we could say we're practicing or developing the mind of loving kindness. If we develop the thought, may beings be free from suffering, may those who are suffering be free from their suffering, then we're developing compassion. So when we practice in that way, it's not yet jhana. But if we continue to practice over and over, day after day, it's possible that that meditation will culminate in the attainment of the jhanas. And when it speaks about, uses the expression, liberation of the mind by loving kindness, that liberation of the mind indicates a state of jhana through loving kindness. So we could say that there's the meditation on loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity, which is, or we call it the preliminary meditation. That's what we do in our ordinary practice. Then when that practice reaches the level of jhana, then it becomes the liberation of the mind by loving kindness. And it's not the final or ultimate liberation of the mind. It doesn't mean the attainment of arhatship. But this is just like a temporary liberation of mind, which can be lost, just like the jhanas can be lost. Okay, shall we go on then? Okay, now we come to the next series of practices that are going to be brought in as a means by which one acts upon the teaching of the teacher, responds to his advice. These are the practices that that constitute what are called the 37 aids to enlightenment, the Bodhipakkhya Dharmas, or sometimes they're called the 37 wings to awakening. So these are 7 groups of practices which are actually intricately interrelated. They're not really so much, each one is not sort of separated off in a silo of its own, separate from the others, but they are interwoven, entangled with each other. And the first of these groups of 7 factors are the 4 satipatthanas, the 4, some translate it, the foundations of mindfulness. Though more recently I've been using the 4 establishments of mindfulness, 4 ways of setting up or establishing mindfulness. But when we look at the formula, it indicates that simply to identify these 4 with mindfulness is an oversimplification. Each one involves, or the formula involves several mental factors that are working together in a kind of synergy to generate the setting up of mindfulness. So here we have that the monk dwells contemplating the body in the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed or put away longing and dejection in regard to the world. Okay, then similarly he dwells contemplating feelings in feelings, contemplating mind in mind, contemplating phenomena in phenomena. More than I bargained for. Okay, what's interesting about the first expression, Ekaka-nipāta, some translate this as, in fact, I think the translation of the middle length discourses has this, one contemplates the body as a body. But if that was the intention, I think a different way of formulating it in Pali would have been used. It would have said, Kayang kayato anupasi viharati. Now if one takes this literally, this is the way I would render it. One dwells as a body contemplator, that's kayanupasi, in the body or in regard to the body. And for the next one, one dwells as a feeling contemplator in regard to feelings. One dwells as a mind contemplator in regard to the mind. And one dwells as a Dhamma contemplator or a contemplator of Dhammas in regard to Dhammas. Okay, there are various ways to understand this duplication of each object. And the way I would understand it is that the object is repeated in order to show that one focuses specifically upon that object, not mixing it up with the other objects. Even though the four always occur sort of intertwined and entangled with each other, body, feelings, mind, and mental phenomena. But when one is practicing contemplation of the body, then one takes the body as one's focus point, not the feelings, not the mind, not the mental phenomena. Similarly, when one is contemplating feelings, then one takes as the primary object the feelings, even though the feelings naturally arise based on the body, but one is homing in on the feelings. When one is contemplating the mind, even though the mind occurs the mind is always embodied in our experience, but one is focusing in specifically on the mental state. And then when one contemplates the dhammas, the mental phenomena, then one is sort of putting in the background the other three and focusing in specifically on these groups of mental phenomena. Okay, so the main part or main aspect in the four satipatthanas is indicated by this word anupassi, which comes from the prefix anu plus the verb pasati. The verb pasati means to see. Of course, as you know, those who have studied Pali know it's a very common verb. To see. And then it has the prefix anu, which has the nuances of closely and repeatedly. And so anupassi, which we translate contemplating, means literally it's seeing, observing closely, carefully, and repeatedly. And then in this act of close observation, we have three descriptive terms, actually four descriptive terms are used. The first three come one after the other and indicate what is involved in contemplating mindfully or contemplating the body. So we have the word atapi, which is what I translate as ardent. And atapi comes from the verb tapati, which means to burn or also to shine. And actually it's from the word tapati that we get an important Indian word. A word that's important in Indian contemplative spirituality. The word is tapas, which takes on the meaning of, during the Buddha's time, of self-torment, the practice of tormenting oneself, imposing afflictions upon oneself, with the idea that by doing so, one builds up an inner spiritual power through which one can break through the normal barriers of the mind and reach states of higher realization, and also exercise supernormal powers. Okay, the Buddha took this idea of tapas and he rejected the practice of self-mortification, but he reinterpreted tapas to mean diligent striving, energy, the energy that's invested in diligent striving. So that's why I translate atapi as ardent, and the noun atapa would be ardor or fervor. So this is practicing diligently, fervently, ardently. Okay, then the next word in the series is sampajano. And sampajano is based on the verb janati. Which means to know. And it has two prefixes, sang plus pa. Sang usually gives a suggestion of completeness or thoroughness or collectedness. And pa, I don't know the particular effect that it has. But if we leave aside the sum and we just have pujanati, it takes on the meaning of to understand. And then from pujanati, we get the noun panya, which is wisdom. But sampajano doesn't indicate complete wisdom, but rather, I used as the translation for it, clear comprehension, because this is still part of the process of contemplation. It's not yet a stage of realization. But as one is practicing this contemplation, one has to be understanding or comprehending what one is contemplating, what one is observing. So the sampajano, it introduces the element of comprehension, which goes along with the observation. So anupassi is observation, atapi is the energy or fervor, sampajano is the comprehension. And then the next word, satima, is of course taken from sati, which is mindfulness, and the suffix mant means one who possesses. So satima is one who possesses mindfulness. And so we could just translate this with the adverb mindful. So one dwells contemplating the body and the body, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful. And so what is mindfulness? The big question, which is, nowadays there are books and books written, what is mindfulness? It's become the most popular subject, I think, in the field of self-help. You could, if you just go into Google and you put mindfulness, search, you'll get a million ways of practicing mindfulness. But what is the root meaning of mindfulness? My understanding, I can't write a book about it because it's very simple, but it's keeping the object in mind, retaining the object in mind, not forgetting the object, not letting the mind drift away from the object. So in common Indian usage, the word sati, or in the Sanskrit form smriti, smriti means memory. So that is the pre-Buddhist usage. And the Buddha took this word, smriti or Pali sati, and then gave it this meaning of not necessarily remembering the past, but remembering the object that is present before one. So it's keeping the object in mind, not forgetting the object, not letting the mind drift away from the object. So when you're cooking, you know you're cooking. You keep your mind absorbed in the act of cooking. When you're washing the dishes, you keep the mind absorbed in the act of washing the dishes. If you're taking a shower, you know that you're taking a shower. You don't let the mind daydream and drift. So this is mindfulness. And when you're observing the body, then you keep the mind on the body, or that particular aspect of the body that one is focusing on. If one is practicing contemplation of feelings, then one keeps the mind on the feelings, not letting the mind drift away in the stream of thoughts. And then if the mind does drift away, get carried away by the stream of thoughts, then when one recovers one's mindfulness, one remembers, my mind is drifting, or one becomes aware my mind is drifting, and one remembers, I should be aware of the feelings. And then one brings the mind back to the feelings. And so with the citta, the state of mind, so with the dhammas, the mental phenomena. Okay, then under these four headings, these four primary headings, which are the four ways of establishing mindfulness, each one comprises a number of practices. For example, contemplation of the body includes mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of the postures, mindfulness and clear comprehension in various activities, the observation of the 32 parts of the body, the contemplation of the elements, the contemplation of the decay of the body, and so on. So each of these, as we could say, is a general heading under which there come a variety of secondary phenomena to be contemplated. Okay, maybe I could ask now whether there's any questions. Okay, the question is, what is the difference between meditation subject and meditation object? No difference. But maybe I say that there's no actual difference, but maybe the two words have different nuances. So meditate, when we use meditation subject, it means the particular topic on which one should be meditating. And so it would involve sort of entailed by that would be the explanation of the method of practice, practicing with that object. So say the meditation subject of mindfulness of breathing, we would have maybe the instructions when you're breathing in, You should be aware of breathing in. When you're breathing out, you should be aware of breathing out. The place where you should set up the post of observation for the breath, around the nostrils or the upper lip. So that would be the meditation subject. The meditation object would be that same object, or that same subject when it becomes an object in one's own experience. So what is my object? So somebody asks, like when you're sitting there, say for your 45 or 50 minutes, what is your object? Like what is the thing, the particular entity that's present to your mind, or that should be present to your mind? That is the object.
Maybe, so it's like grammar. So it's like, you know, when you speak a language, you have the subject and the object. And the subject is what an action happens to when the object is
I
what
see.
the
I don't
object.
think it's so much like that, because in that case, that's using subject and object in a somewhat different sense, yeah.
All
And in
right.
that case, in grammar or in a sentence, the subject does something to the object. But it's not the case that the meditation subject is doing something to the meditation object.
Mm.
But the meditation subject would be the theme or topic that one is meditating on. And then the object is, when I'm practicing that meditation, then it's, the subject then becomes my object, because it's my mind. I would say that the mind is the subject, and then the meditation subject is the object.
Okay.
That's where the subject-object relationship comes in.
All right.
I have a question about the mindfulness. So the mindfulness, for example, you give example like washing and cooking, right? If you wash vegetables, so basically your mind is not, it's going every second that it's going to be different. So it's keep changing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So basically your mind is actually not going to the differentiation, right? For example, this is a good vegetable, tasting something, I like it or something. Do not go into the differentiation, and you just do it without actually wondering, have your own opinion.
Without wondering, but there'll be necessarily, when performing an action, a complex action like washing vegetables, there'll be differentiation.
So basically no differentiation, no not going to two sides, basically.
Not going.
Two sides, like or dislike.
Yeah, but there'll be differentiation, because as you pick up each vegetable is different, and then the act of washing it, you have to turn it around, rub it.
Right, you just do it without actually going into the differentiation mind.
No, there'll be some differentiation, but one doesn't let the mind drift away from the act of washing the vegetables. But when you're attentive to washing vegetables, then you'll become aware of different aspects of the texture of what kind of vegetable it is, the texture of the vegetable, the feeling of the water, and the act of rubbing it.
So you basically feel the water on your hand, or you just do it basically. You do not have your own opinion on your sense.
Yeah.
So basically you just do what it is.
You just do it,
Yeah.
but you'll be aware of the different aspects of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So there is that differentiation. Yes, please.
Bhante, you were mentioning satima was sati plus mant.
Yeah.
I just didn't catch what the ma or the mant.
Okay. Let me just get that. I lost it. What I wanted to get is, okay, we have the word sati is mindfulness. Okay, then in Pali grammar, there's a suffix mant, which has the meaning of has or possesses. So the stem form is sati mant. So this is one who has mindfulness, who is mindful. And then because of the method of what they call declension, so this becomes the masculine nominative singular. So mant turns into ma when it becomes masculine singular nominative case.
For the suffix mant again, does it have a different meaning in the genitive case because that also implies possession? Is there even a genitive case in Pali?
Oh, of course there is, yeah. So
Yeah.
sati would be sati mato. So this would be what belongs to one who has mindfulness. So let us say the mindful one, the mindful one has a robe. Okay. So sati mato chivarang ati. So for the mindful one, there is a robe.
All right.
Yeah, you don't get a duplication of having.
All right.
Yeah, Asman?
Bhante, could you go into the four foundations of mindfulness? It seems like there could be either serenity or insight.
To go into that question.
Yeah. Because the last one, mind objects, that seems like it's more insight.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
yeah.
but it could be, either of them could be both.
Or what?
Either of the four could be both.
It's a pretty complex subject, but let us say that the four foundations of mindfulness as a whole could be used in the mode for developing either serenity or insight. But certain meditation subjects amongst them are more conducive to samatha, to serenity or concentration. Others more conducive to, or let's say others are more appropriate within the field of developing insight. Particularly the fourth foundation of mindfulness, the aspect of insight becomes more prominent.
Exactly. That's so. When it comes to right concentration, like Stephen asked about, as far as the supermundane.
You have to speak louder.
As far as the right concentration.
Yeah.
In the Noble Eightfold Path, that sounds to me like it's insight.
Right concentration.
Yeah, or it could be both.
Well, right concentration, the way it's defined in the formula for of the Noble Eightfold Path, it's defined as the four jhanas. And those four jhanas are states of samatha or samadhi. But we understand that the sama samadhi, right concentration, is not the end, though it's the last factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's not the final goal of the path, that all of the other path factors are just coming to their conclusion with right concentration. But rather that right concentration then has to be used as a basis for developing insight. And then that becomes the right view, samadhi, but now elevated to a different level where it becomes the level of experiential insight rather than conceptual understanding.
In the Great 40, I believe it's the Great 40,
yeah.
Surah number 117.
Yeah.
I get the flavor that right concentration, supermundane right concentration.
Yeah, that's a rather complex sutta also.
Yeah. So is it insight in that surah for the world transcending.
It's too complicated to explain.
Oh, okay.
I'll just have to pass that up. But it seems, actually, when it speaks, in that sutta, when it's speaking about that right concentration, samma samadhi, accompanied by its requisites, equipment and its requisites, that is, I think, speaking about the supramundane or world transcending right concentration.
So that means insight.
So that is the right concentration which arises, built upon the insight and realization of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, I think we'll have to end for the morning. And so we'll break now, and then we could come back maybe 12:15 for some further questions and discussion. Okay, then we have the class next week. Yeah, it's the 22nd. Okay, so let us share the merits. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabbasampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabbasampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabbasampati siddhya. Pavagopadaya avici hetato etantare satakai upapana rupya rupicha asanya sanino tukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, then we can do 3 half bows.